Is everybody with us? Well, if I have Amy Bach with me, we can go ahead and start. So as soon as we have Amy,
You've got me. I'm here. I'm
Amy, how are you
hiding.
doing?
I'm doing well. It's great to be with you.
Well, it's great to be with you. There you go. I knew we'd find you. I love technology as we try to do this. And thank you everybody for, coming, and watching. This is our first claim game that we've had. And this is going to be a long time interactive series. And I'm going to try to have some of the best, most important leaders that there are in the insurance claims world. And I thought I'd start tonight with somebody who's very dear to me and somebody I've known for a long period of time, Amy Bach. Since 1991, United Policyholders has been on the forefront of helping policyholders with all their insurance claims problems. And Amy's been right there now decades, doing this. And I often say you prove yourself over a long period of time. Some people do things for a short period of time. The real test is how long you can keep doing something, do it passionately, and then excelling at it as well. And my impression of Amy is she's done all of that, and there's a huge debt of gratitude a lot of people have to her and everybody who works at United Policyholders. And whether it's been the California earthquakes, all the wildfires that have happened in California, Superstorm Sandy, Katrina, I mean, all the various places. And Amy, you and I have met at all kinds of town hall meetings, all types of roadmap to recovery projects, that you've run from continental United States now out to Hawaii. All the various meetings that you've gone to with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, meeting with various insurance regulators, writing laws, writing regulations that get adopted, that help protect and support policyholders and even the insurance system. I think you've done just an exemplary job, and I just can't imagine a better person to start off this claim game podcast other than you. So,
Well, it's my
yeah,
pleasure to be on, and you know that we have a mutual admiration society going, Chip. So thank you.
I was out in Sonoma, and whenever I go out and see you, most of the time I see you at Sears Cafe, in downtown San Francisco for breakfast or lunch, and as we try to catch up on everything. But why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? I don't think people really know, about you, your background before you joined United Policyholders, and then how did United Policyholders first start? What's the genesis of this?
So, first of all, thank you again for having me on, and thank you for everything you do. And as much as I'm proud of United Policyholders and everything that we do all day, all year around for to empower the insured and to provide information and guidance that helps people be treated fairly by insurance companies, make good decisions, and basically contribute to the insurance system working the way it needs to for people. um, Really when the rubber meets the road and an insurance company says talk to the hand, um, you know that's a little bit where our power stops and yours starts. We'll always say to people, go to your Department of Insurance in your state, file a complaint, and get the free help that you can there. But we're pretty sophisticated at United Policyholders and understand the realities of the system in which we are living, and that it's very often, it's the kind of expertise that you and your team bring that makes the difference between somebody getting what they paid for and what they need, versus being homeless or being facing financial ruin. So that I just need to get that out there, that it's a team effort, policyholder advocacy, and so thank you for everything that you and your team do, and you're unusual, because lots of folks, most attorneys, they operate in one jurisdiction, one place. You're nationwide. You have, we're able to tap your expertise and your team's expertise in different states. So that's why I say it's a mutual appreciation society. So a little bit about me and our background. So I was born in Brooklyn, and my first job out of Cornell was working in the New York State Legislature as an intern. And I got randomly assigned to a Brooklyn Democrat who could have been my relative, I think. And she was a consumer advocate, and I had had a job when I was in college, going door to door for something called Mass Fair Share, and we would a van would drop us off, and they were a nonprofit. The van would drop us off, and you had your route, you had a little map, and you had to go door to door and ring people's doorbells, and we had a little rap. Oh, did you know that a portion of your utility bill goes to pay to mow the CEO's lawn in front of his mansion? Do you think you should be paying for that as a policyholder? I'm sorry, as a ratepayer, as a utility ratepayer. And people, if they were, if the rap resonated with them, they'd make a donation to the organization. And it was a great gig for me because I'm a people person. I like talking to people. I'm interested in people, and it kind of it was a real exercise in judging your audience. And you could judge people. You're like, oh, well, there's a Volvo in the driveway. That's a good sign. That kind of thing. Peace sign on the lawn. That's a good sign. And so I got in the habit of talking to people about something that was kind of political, sort of legal, but affected their pocketbook, and trying to help them, understand why supporting a nonprofit was going to be in their own best interest. And so I did that job while I was in school, and I kind of absorbed that consumer advocate vibe at doing that. And so when I graduated and I went to work for this lawmaker who kind of had that same approach of like, she carried a bill that, when they were changing New York City used to have one area code, right? 212. And the population started getting so big that they had to add 718. And so we carried a bill, and I have the signed certificate framed in my office, saying that the phone company couldn't start charging you long distance for a call from borough to borough. So that was kind of our first like consumer advocacy type of a gig. And so I worked for her for a couple of years, and then I got plucked off to work for a small agency called the New York State Consumer Protection Board that was created by the first Daddy Cuomo, Governor Mario Cuomo. And I was working there, and because I was the baby, they made me the insurance and banking analyst because nobody else wanted to do that boring topic, right? Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. I apologize in advance. So I didn't know a tort from a tart. I didn't own I owned a car. So I had bought car insurance. I knew nothing about property insurance, nothing about liability insurance. I was not a lawyer. But like 3 weeks into my job there, I'm analyzing bills and, legislative things. And Hank Greenberg, who was the founder of AIG, famous yet infamous, came up to Albany with a guy named John Creedon, who was at the time the CEO of Metropolitan Life, with a wish list, a tort reform wish list, which he brought to the legislature and said, these lawsuits are killing us, insurance companies. You got to make it harder for people to sue us. You got to get rid of the collateral source rule. You got to cap pain and suffering. You got to cap attorney's fees. You got to do all these things.
Sounds like what they're still saying today.
Amazing, right? The more things change, the more they remain the same. I got to tell you, Chip, if this gets too crazy with the coughing, I don't know, we'll figure something out. Excuse me. Okay. So, um, so my boss was like, you've got to follow this and figure this out, right? So the legislature, there were some trial lawyers and they were in the room. Um, they decided to create what do they do? A commission, right? The commission on liability reform something. Let's look at all these proposals. And it was a fancy commission. They had Fred Schwartz of FAO Schwartz, it's Corporation Counsel of New York City, and all these important people, judges and insurance execs and all that. And there I am representing my agency. And I'm sure I was very annoying because sorry, one thing I have going for me is I'm bold and not really afraid, to speak truth to power. I have instincts for fairness, right? So I've allied with some people to say, okay, let's get the facts,
Right.
because we do have really great filters for frivolous lawsuits in our system. They get thrown out. So artificially limiting people's remedies in court is generally not healthy for the checks and balances that the civil justice system provides on corporate decision making, right? You got a for-profit, industry. Insurance affects people's lives, livelihoods. It's a big deal, right? So you need to make sure that that profit motive gets held in check, that there are checks and balances, right? People's ability to hire a lawyer on contingency and be able to fight the Goliath is requires there to be economic incentives to make those type lawsuits feasible. So for every action there's a reaction, right? You make it harder for people to sue, and you're going to embolden cheating is kind of the logic,
Absolutely.
right?
I
Yeah,
mean,
right,
essentially, the law, the civil laws, to hold people accountable for the
right.
law and especially their wrongs or breaking of promises. So I agree with you.
Exactly. Exactly. So even as a young, youngster, I could see that the insurers in Albany at the time kind of were writing their own ticket. There was no consumer, there was no United Policyholders, there was no consumer watchdog. There was Hunter, who Bob Hunter. He and Ralph Nader flew in. Hunter had a small group. What was it? It was like it was some very tiny nonprofit that it was basically him and
It's
his
before he was with the Consumer Federation of America.
long before he had something anyway. So they came and I hung out with them and learned as much as I could from them. But I thought to myself, boy, the policyholders need more help here. They need, and this was something I can make myself useful in this way. So I got shut out of a meeting ostensibly because I wasn't a lawyer, but probably because I was mouthy and annoying. And so I was like, all right, I'll go get my law degree. So I came out to California to get my law degree cheap at the UC Hastings, and I just, I was already an insurance consumer advocate by the time I was in law school. So while I was in law school, I did some really interesting things. There was like an 18 states attorney general um, lawsuit against the London-based reinsurers for conspiring to affect the U.S. tort system. Very interesting lawsuit. Lots of those in the past, not so much now in terms of like attorneys general bringing that kind of a suit. Although we did see it, as with Unum Provident, right? We did. Anyway, finished law school, had a job lined up at a fancy New York firm on the probably on the dark side. But Prop 103 had passed here in California, which is a ballot measure. And somehow I got sucked into volunteering with them because the ballot measure had passed. It's saying like we can cap insurer profits. We can force them to rebate overcharges, and then we can prescribe what they're allowed to charge, what factors they can use when they're rating and what they can't, right? They have to give you a discount if you're a good driver, that kind of thing. So I thought it was fascinating and I said, oh, I'll just help them out a little bit. But then I got so into it that I turned down the corporate job, stayed here, worked for them for a couple years, found that my style and their founder didn't really jive.
Who is them, Amy, that you went to work for?
Harvey Rosenfield, the
Okay.
predecessor of Consumer Watchdog. So Harvey Rosenfield was a Nader's Raider, Nader Raider type guy, right? Came out of Public Citizen and all that. And Prop 103 was his baby. And he was my client, basically, and I was one of his people that were working to make Prop 103 work, because of course the insurers filed umpteen lawsuits to invalidate all the different provisions. So we were defending them in different places, right? There was one piece of it that made forced insurance companies to include in a premium notice, um, the opportunity to contribute to like a basically like a policyholder advocacy fund or something. And the insurers said that's a First Amendment violation. You can't make us, be the messenger of that or something like that. They won that one, but most of them, their challenges, they lost, and it went into law. But after a couple of years, I was like, I didn't feel like I was the right fit for that kind of fiery, like, what they did, this publicity stunt where they dumped a bunch of horse manure on the doorstep of farmers' corporate offices. And that's just not really my style. I'm much more like, let's see if we can find a solution here, right? So I went to work for Ray Boris, who was a litigator, first party bad faith lawyer, for a couple years. Had a couple of clients that had been mistreated by insurance companies. We tried a couple cases together. We tried a big whistleblower case against State Farm for firing somebody in violation of public policy because they had my client had called out State Farm. And this is so funny, when it's not funny, but when I hear the whistleblowers coming out of Florida and, about the altered engineering reports, I'm like, ah, like nothing new under the sun, in this game, it feels like. So what was my client fired for? Well, because he called State Farm out on underpaying earthquake claims, right? So we had, I kind of started to get into that, and um, and then my client's boss was a woman named Ina DeLong. She had
Right.
decided she left State Farm. She really was the whistleblower. But for whatever reason, she decided not to hire a lawyer and not to sue. But she did come to Ray and said and say, hey, I need some help here. So he sicked her on me, and I was like, this woman's great. She's a Republican. She's, very not at all a hippie. She's very nothing on me, but anyway, now my
So
secret.
you
Having
call yourself a hippie?
a little bit, a little bit. Well, you saw me in
I
action.
saw you hitting the drums out there in Sonoma. Most people, but we can talk about that a little bit later. But so it's Ina DeLong and with Ray Boers and you, and what happens?
So we started a little working group. We had a couple of agents that were like willing to, call both on some insurance practices. And we had a little working group thinking, what should we do? Let's form a resource for policyholders. And I think we had picked the name United Policyholders, but we hadn't done anything legally or, articles of incorporation or anything. We had our little group and we were ready to roll. And then the Oakland Berkeley firestorm hit, October of 20, I'm sorry, 20, I wish, 1991.
Mhm.
And Ray, trial lawyer, you guys, you get over there and start holding meetings, right? I'm like, you're right. Okay, fine. So Ina and I went over and had our first meeting at the public library. We had our little signs, policyholders, come and get informed, and you don't have to get rolled over, and like we'll tell you what your rights are and help you make sure you get what you paid for. So that the thing started in the Oakland Hills on the natural. Ray ended up not, my boss didn't actually have that much to do with it. He basically just connected me with Ina, and we had a great yin yang, like there I am, the bookish, went to lots of overeducated, long time, Democrat, and then pairing it with somebody who had, 20 years in the insurance industry, very, traditional looking, very, she had gone up through the ranks, very much a pro, she taught me the, State Farm first, then God, then country, that whole credo. She lived that for her whole career. She was an agent. She went up through the ranks,
You know,
and then she had her consciousness raised in the
that
aftermath.
even today, there's a lot of State Farm people, claims adjusters that I meet that have been with State Farm their entire lives. And one of the biggest things is when they leave voluntary, they become disenchanted. It's real hard. It's almost like they're leaving a cult at times to talk and about it. And they feel so guilty talking about the negative aspects of it. And don't get me wrong, there's not, the truth of the matter is they feel so positive about State Farm when something's not right happening. It takes a toll, emotional toll on them. And I know speaking with Anya way back when, that was really big. And the media, all of a sudden caught attention to what you guys were doing.
Yeah, I mean, Ina was on 60 Minutes back then as the grandma of the insurance wars. And again, now she was not, rah litigation, not at all. She was very much, um, you know, people paid for something and they deserve what they paid for. And that, of course, resonates with me. And that's still what motivates me to this day. People will say, people always have this thought, nonprofits are focused on helping the, underserved, low income, minority, whatever, right? And I'm like, you know what? We're we help the have somes, right? People who have enough to have that they need to protect by buying insurance. And we're here to help them get what they paid for, and we want the system to work for them.
So, I guess 1991 and some of the initial starts, did you think that United Policyholders would grow to what it is today way back then?
No, and I certainly didn't think I would be the one running it. The idea was always that Ina would be the face, right? Somebody who went up through the ranks as a claim adjuster, a senior, da 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 da, and also was an agent and all that stuff. Um, and but I think we she was never interested in fundraising. Is it's not very pleasant, it's not the fun part of the job, and I was happy to take care of all the stuff, get the articles of incorporation and the legalities and constitute a board, and she was really into the like Hurricane Andrew hit 1992. She got in her red Cadillac because she did not like to fly, drove to Florida, lands in Tampa, says, Amy, we're going to open an office here. I'm like, okay. I found a lawyer. I can't believe we didn't know. We probably.
I don't think it was until about 1995 that you and I first had
Yeah.
any interaction. And then, I mean, this is embarrassing. When I first started doing any work with you, I flipped the names around for about 2 years. I kept calling United Policyholders Policyholders United, and other attorneys would look at me and go, "You got this wrong." I go, "Yeah, you're right, I do." But I would then go back to calling it Policyholders United. I mean, until about 1998 or so. I mean, that's embarrassing to say, but it's true.
It's all right.
And
It's all
and
right.
what
We get called. Yeah, we
it was,
get,
yeah,
I
you
was.
were a fledgling organization. It seemed at the time, and then Ina kind of left, and you were left running the show.
Well, what happened was Northridge earthquake hit. Right. So we worked Hurricane Andrew a little bit. We had some big meetings, actually. We had a financial planner down there, Linda Lubitz, who helped us, and we got a guy. We had an office in Tampa, and we did these big meetings to raise awareness and all that. But that really we were busy here with the Oakland Berkeley. I mean, we were organizing people. We had all these volunteers. We had mediators, and we were doing groups by insurance company. And when a disaster hits an area with a lot of professionals, a lot of educated people, like what we're seeing in LA, they get organized, and it was so it was a great kind of experiment for us. But then fast forward, and we built at the time, in the aftermath of the Oakland Berkeley wildfire, we built our core programs. We built the roadmap to recovery, right? We built advocacy in action. Right out of the gate, people were having issues with code upgrades, right? And by the way, I don't mean to pick on State Farm, because frankly, they just happen to be the big one, the biggest one with the biggest market share in many, many markets. many other insurers are guilty of a lot of the same practices that they are. So I don't like to just pick on them. I just want to be clear about that. But they're an easy target because they can be so tough. Um, and their promises are so loud, right? All their ads, and it's just so easy to say, "Hey, what you said, right? You say?" Anyway, so Northridge earthquake hits in '94, and things started to get kind of complicated. And Ina decided that she was more interested in lobbying. I think she was trying to, earn her living by kind of having, UP be sort of a hobby, and she was trying to be an expert witness. And insurance company lawyers would depose her, and she just would start crying. She couldn't handle it. So, and I was trying to help her. I mean, it was a labor of love for me. I was still working as a lawyer. We didn't have enough money to pay me. I worked for UP without a salary for like 11 years. So, but so she decided she wanted to take it in another direction, and I said, well, we're a 501c3, so if we want to really lobby a lot, we got to become a C4. We got to, she didn't want any of that. So she just left and took our hard drive, and it was not a pleasant time because we lost our whole database from 5 years of working, gone. And I'm just stubborn. And I was like, wait a minute. Here's an organization that's so important. It has a great reputation. No, we're going to keep going. No, we are definitely going to keep going. We are not disappearing just because she made a bad decision. And so, I got lucky. I got introduced to a woman who had done like bookkeeping for nonprofits, and we had, even then, we had wonderful people. Like, we didn't know each other yet, but there were people, Bill Chernoff and some other people, some of the agents that were involved, and some financial planners, and enough of the people that we had helped,
Amy,
that
that brings up a really great, like right now, where do you get most of your funding from? Where do your grants come from? I mean, how is it that you're able to do these things all over the country and help people out?
foundation funding, by a law, like by a factor of many, right? We get some support from professionals, for sure. We have our sponsor program, but the bulk of our support comes from foundations. So the Center for Disaster Philanthropy is funding the work that we've been doing in Florida. Also on Maui, community foundations. So the California Community Foundation is funding a lot of what we're doing in LA. The Boulder Community Foundation is funding what we've been doing in Colorado. It took us a really long time to get traditional philanthropy to invest in an insurance consumer advocacy group, because I think for a lot of people they're like, what did you do, what
I
is
know
it?
there are some apologists for the insurance industry that every now and then start raising their, well, where does she get all of her money from to do this? It must be those, they always go back to those greedy attorneys must be feeding Amy Bach all this, or the public adjusters. And I think we ought to set that record straight.
Well, we should just publish the pie chart, because there's no comparison. And a lot of the preparedness work that we do is funded by like the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, right? So again, we are kind of a nerdy, nonprofit, but unfortunately, in the last, I don't know, 15 years, insurance issues just keep getting more and more into the forefront in the media, in the news, and it's become to the attention of philanthropists that it is incredibly important. If you care about Americans' financial health, you know, insurance is a big part of Americans' financial health. And so, we're getting more support in that from that.
Well, so talking about that, Amy, why don't you talk about what you think it's most important for policyholders to do after a major catastrophe, whether it's a wildfire in California or Colorado, or floods that might happen in Louisiana or Florida? What in the first 72 hours, what is it that policyholders should do? Where should they go?
So we always tell people, try to get a notebook, pad of paper and start yourself a journal as soon as you can, where you start writing notes every day. Who'd you talk to? What's their phone number? What's their name? We tell people, understand that being affected by a disaster, it can be like losing a loved one. It's very traumatic. You're not thinking clearly. So number one is to be kind to yourself, and recognize you're not going to be at your top, top power, right? So you need to keep this diary so that you stay organized in that way. Um, and that you're going to get a lot of pressure coming at you from every direction to make decisions quickly. But we really encourage people, focus on getting a safe, uh, and reasonably convenient place for yourself and your family to live temporarily. And yeah, notify your insurance company, but understand, like, if and this is where it gets a little tricky, right? People will say, oh, notify your insurance company right away. And if it's a total loss or if it's a very serious loss, for sure. But if it's a minor loss, we like people to take a beat. Just take a beat, because if the claim might not exceed your deductible, if it's minor damage, that's the kind of thing. These days, we're trying to help people avoid losing their insurance or having their insurance go, beyond where they can afford it. So yeah, so you open a claim if you're absolutely sure that it's pretty serious damage. And then you want to get a copy of your policy, and then you really want to have a realistic mindset about what an insurance claim is. It is not like the ads you see on TV, at all. It is a business negotiation.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Tell me about your roadmap to recovery and what that offers to policyholders who've just suffered a loss, and what that can do for them to empower them.
So, roadmap to recovery is a suite of tools and information, publications, samples of letters you can customize, survey information, and guidance, tips from past survivors who've been there, done that. Right? People don't like to be called victims; they like to be called survivors because they've overcome it. So, um, tips from past survivors. One of the most important parts of the Roadmap to Recovery program is that we offer people technical information that comes from people like you, volunteers like you, that support us, that know the laws, know the rules, and people like public adjusters that know the game. They know, they know what exactment is. They know how, what kind of tricks, gamesmanship, um, comes into play, right? And so the roadmap to recovery is information and resources so people can be their own best advocates, not get taken advantage of, make good decisions, and get the right help when they need it. Whether that be from a government agency, from a law firm, or a public adjuster, or an estimator, or somebody to do remediation that's going to do the work right. Because really, and you know this better than most people, it
I,
gets
I
pretty
hope I know it more than most people because they're coming to me for help. But
right.
what I think what United Policyholders is about, Amy, and I think what you're doing is you're providing this information up to them for free. So frankly, if it's possible, they are empowered to do a lot of this claims handling almost themselves, if they can, until they reach an impasse or it becomes impossible for them to do so. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's kind of how I read most of the things from United Policy. You're there to empower the policyholder.
That's our tagline, empowering the insured. And we say to people, when you bought insurance, you paid for coverage and good claim service, and you shouldn't have to pay twice for it. But the reality is, you often do when you're up against a big corporation, that and your financial interests are not the same.
Right.
You may need help, and part of our program is to help people identify where the trustworthy help is. And it gets so crazy after disasters with all these people offering and help, and people aren't quite always sure, well, who can I trust, and
You
and
find
we
they're
try
more
to.
scared. Do you find that there are more scammers out there today than what there used to be, or is it just the same scammer game but just different with the internet?
Oh no, I mean it's become a very fine art, I think, to insert yourself into the process, as a professional, in a way that, and no, listen, there's some fantastic professionals out there who help people, of course, like your firm and a lot of the people we know. People who are members of trade associations, people who uphold ethics in their business operations. But boy, the circus comes to town now after disasters, and you can see it in LA with, there's like, I can't, every time I turn around there's like a new startup of some kind purporting to help people, and some of it will be helpful, but some of it is just entrepreneurial activity, and that's something that we have not, didn't see as much in the past as we see now.
So when insurance commissioners and attorneys general in the various states start to warn policyholders about watching out for scams and people that might be trying to take advantage of them, that's something you would agree with on that type of messaging?
I mean, I often feel like they're tarring public adjusters unfairly, or they're tarring. Um, I mean, I will say one. This is a little delicate. I have seen, the personal injury bar kind of starting to kind of come in. I always tell people, like, you really, if you're going to go to a lawyer on an insurance matter, it should be a policyholder lawyer, and be like, what's that? That's somebody who, that's what they do. They analyze insurance policies. They counsel people on insurance matters. There's a great, group of them in the United States, and frankly, I like to think that most of them are involved with United Policyholders. These are, people like your firm, that understand that we do need the system to work.
Well,
Um,
I'm going to get to that in probably the last 5 minutes about what
okay.
other professionals and other people that are really interested can do to help United policyholders. Let me change the question just a little bit, because I saw we had a question from the audience, right, which I think is a good one. If we go back to Hurricanes Milton and Helene, and now we're about 7 months post those hurricanes and floods, for people that don't have their claims resolved, for people that are having problems, what's your word to those policyholders right now? What United policyholders tell them?
Have somebody take. Well, first of all, we always say, did somebody reputable and experienced tell you what happened to your property? Like, give you an estimate? What happened here? What happened to my property from this event? And what needs to be done to put my to house back to its pre-loss condition, or my business? And a lot of people kind of skip that because they know they're getting lowballed, or they feel they're sure they're getting lowballed by their insurer, and they get all worked up, but they don't have their proof. So we tell people, try to get your own documentation, right? Document your loss. This is your asset. This is you. You have the biggest stake in making sure that the damage gets fairly and accurately estimated, and the fix gets estimated as well. So that we do try to bring people back to that. What happened here?
A lot of times people ask, hey, I'm not getting anywhere. At what time should they seek, professional assistance from a lawyer or a public adjuster, do you think?
Well, generally, we tell people when you've hit a wall, now that's different for each person, right? Some people right out of the gate, I'm going to say, you know what, this person's got a disabled kid, or they've got an illness, and, they have a total loss. Unless their insurer is ready to write them a check for policy limits, very often, I would, if they were to ask us, we'll say you definitely you should talk to some professionals, because professional help is available on a contingent fee basis if you're not able to handle this thing, right? We always say to people, give your insurance company a chance to do the right thing, but don't be a pushover, be realistic, and get the right help when you need it. And that's not the same timing for everybody, right? But definitely, you know, there's no reason to let the thing fester and be, in a stress fest and not sleep, because you feel like your insurance company is not behaving as they should, or you're not getting the attention that you deserve, there's no reason to drag that out, because most of the firms that in fact, yeah, most of the firms that do policyholder work, well, I mean, there's many of them that only do hourly, but there's many of them that do work on a contingency basis, and they'll give you a free assessment of your case. I mean, as long as you don't, sign on the dotted line before you actually have a chance to think about it, there's never any harm in getting a professional assessment of your claim dispute if you have one, at
All
any
right.
stage.
Well, let me change it around a little bit. We're little past 3 months, right at 3 months, plus from the fires out in Southern California. Um, there's all kinds of news coming out. I'm going to ask this: what's the biggest news? What are the concerns that you're hearing from most of the policyholders? What should everybody in Southern California who's a policyholder who's been wiped out, whether it's a business or a homeowner, what should they be doing?
So definitely getting their arms around what happened to their property, right? So if it's a total loss, you want to be aiming for that as was rebuild. What would it cost to put my house back, like, kind, and quality, up to current building codes, and then what are my available policy limits? And if you can't figure that out, the DOI has been offering free workshops. We've done a couple of pro bono clinics, and we've already done a lot of events to help people at least understand how much insurance they have available and how much they need to put Humpty Dumpty back together. Right now, you asked me, what are the biggest challenges for the total losses? It's underinsurance, right? Whether they're, underinsurance is a national crisis. We could have a whole hour talking about why, but it just is. People don't have enough insurance, right? Then then for the partials, it's the fight that's blown up. It's in the courts, it's in the regulatory arena, it's in the media. This was a major toxic type event, right? This was an urban
And
conflict.
you always say toxic. What do you mean, Amy?
They're finding lead, they're finding asbestos, microparticles in homes that just were, just because of the intensity of the fires, and the wind, blew the smoke into people's homes through, vents, and if their windows open and all that stuff, and they're finding levels of lead in people's homes, and there's no
So,
safe level of lead.
what are you hearing as to the various responses from the carriers? Does it vary from carrier to carrier, or is
I
there
mean,
something that's pretty consistent within the industry?
some variation. You know, the Fair Plan's got a terrible reputation for the way they've been handling smoke claims, and we've been battling. We've been. There's a long history of us saying, "Hey, wait a minute, the Fair Plan's not treating smoke claims fairly."
Yeah, I call it the unfair plan. But
Yeah.
uh,
So you and a
so
lot
if
of
we
other
get away from
people,
the California Fair Plan, which is
yeah.
a crazy association, what about the other carriers? What's going on with them?
Uh,
What type of responses are you seeing?
Well, I think that it keeps changing, right? The more LA County and the health department put out public things, and the commissioner put out a bulletin, and there just was another announcement, and they're going to be monitoring all the areas, and people can report in, and you know, I have to commend one insurer that actually told their insured, you got to move out. Our you know we sent somebody, and they found unhealthy
Come on,
levels.
who's the carrier? Let everybody.
uh,
Who's the carrier?
Mercury. I mean,
Mercury.
yeah. So again, I'm not saying they're doing great for everybody, but I don't like to slag all the insurers with one brush, because I will say, the smoke damage issue after wildfires has been getting more and more and more contentious over the years, because insurers are just not used to paying the kind of tab that they're now being asked to pay, but they've got to pay it, because what they haven't been doing is paying for pre remediation testing, and they have to. They've got to pay for it because you don't want to be doing the remediation until you know what you're remediating. You got to start with the testing, and they have not been willing to pay for that. And
So
we're pushing.
what's your, as a result of all these wildfires and all the losses, I would say since 2017, the insurance industry in California has been arguing we can't make any money. We're losing our shirt. We're going to just stop, writing insurance. We're going to pull out. And some of the insurance companies really have. It seems to be a huge issue. What's your take and view on all that in California?
Well, certainly California, um, we've had a marketplace crisis. It started in about 2017, and it's been getting worse and worse. And our organization, has partnered as much as we can with the Insurance Institute for Home and Business Safety, with Cal Fire, with the California Department of Insurance, and with insurers to say, okay, we get it. You're scared about wildfire risk, and all of your tech now that you're buying is magnifying the risks that you were always insuring. But what is it going to take to figure this out? Because we don't have a plan B, meaning we don't have a public insurance option. We don't have that, right? The FAIR plan is run by private insurance companies. So we've been working really hard to try to find, okay, what can we do? Well, we know we can tell people how to reduce risk. That's really important. We can make insurance companies incentivize and reward risk reduction by renewing people who take steps. In your neck of the woods, it's fortified roof, right? Um, and then the insurers, they got a lot of regulatory reforms that they wanted out here, and it was predicted before the LA fires that we were going to see the market start to open up again. Those fires kind of set us back, but the California Insurance Commissioner's sustainable insurance strategy gave insurance companies in California everything they said they needed in order to resume writing here. But listen, you live in Florida. Florida has been innovating and trying everything. You've got a public hurricane fund, which we are now trying to copy. You've got a Colorado to
There are
copy.
people in Florida right now that are laughing at that statement, but I warned people. I said after looking at the Cal Fair plan, maybe Citizens has got, maybe over here in Florida we might have the right idea with respect to Citizens. For you have to understand, an insurer of last resort.
You
At
know
least
what?
go
Yeah.
ahead, let me know. What
No,
do you
no,
think?
it's just not as simple as people would like it to be. I wish it were, right? I mean, you I get why people, hate on Citizens. I do get it. Um, but this is a tough one, but for me to say, but I have to say it. Climate change really is an inconvenient truth. It really is. It's just what Al Gore said. It's like a hot potato, right? It's a cost hot potato. And the insurers are like, we don't want it, right? And the property owners are like, we don't want it, and the politicians are like, well, we don't want it. And I don't know that we have all the solutions in place. I think we've got the pieces that we're starting to, we were on track with these federal grants for risk reduction. The current, administration is kind of reversing that, so that's not helpful. But Chip, you know what? I try not to throw too many bombs at Citizens or Yaworski or that's I'll stop there. Some of the other folks I'm less charitable. I think they've got really, really complicated problems. It's just not easy. Risk is definitely higher. Inflation has definitely made claims cost more, and but people,
So
still want to live.
you
Go
mentioned
ahead.
insurance commissioners and you've mentioned insurance companies. And why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what your work and what your philosophy of working at the National Association of Insurance Commissioners is about?
So I've been going to their meetings 3 times a year as an official insurance consumer advocate. So I have built relationships with a lot of the commissioners. So I've had a bourbon with Mike Jaworski. I have hung out with Dean Cameron, who's from
Some
Idaho.
by you saying that, there are some of my friends that are going to say you've sold out to the devil just by having a cocktail with an insurance commissioner. And I
No,
don't
you
look at
gotta hear them out and try to influence them. That's how I am always functioning, and I think you have a similar approach. It's like, let's dialogue. There you are with Badger back and forth, all right? Let's tease these things out. Is there any common ground here, right? I don't. Listen. I don't. I don't agree with that sort of free market, and let give insurers what they want. Tim Temple in Louisiana, give insurers everything they want and they'll behave. I don't see that as the answer either. So trying to find the right, balance here in terms of, you know, people wanting to live in areas that have disasters cost money. Can we figure this out? I mean, I don't think the answer is letting undercapitalized, um weirdly structured private equity hedge fund insurance entities take people out as citizens, and then, oh gee, we don't have the money because we
yeah.
gave it to ourselves. Like, come on, that's not the way to go either. So, but I think dialogue is so important.
How long have you been working at or going as a consumer advocate at the NAIC?
Since 2009. And so some of the innovations that states are trying to bring, availability back and affordability back, because I mean, California's had a crisis, Florida's had a crisis, Colorado's having a crisis, Louisiana's having a crisis. So this is a national problem, and one of the solutions that I'm really interested in is, um, that reinsurance, the cost of reinsurance is a big driver, right, of what people pay and where you can get insurance. And reinsurance, I mean, it's their world. They are the puppet masters, right? They set their own rates. They're not regulated, all that stuff. So if government can acknowledge that it is in everybody's interests that there be these safety nets under people for mortgages. Listen, that's a whole other topic, right? That we need people to have insurance in place, right? So given that reinsurance is such a big cost driver, um, is there something that would supplement it so that insurers would still buy some reinsurance, but they would also have their catastrophic claims paying capacity come from a public reinsurance facility, um, like your hurricane cap fund. So there's more innovation going on in that realm. Like Colorado is just trying to build something. Idaho was trying to build something. So, that's just one of the solutions, short of, that drastic public insurance program that we may need, if the private sector continues to shy away from risk, which is,
We're
all
down
about it.
we're down to a few minutes. Let me ask you just, Amy, for professionals and others that want to help out or participate, what is it that we can do to volunteer or help, aid United policyholders?
Well, if you are a professional that provides services to policyholders, you should definitely go to our website, look at our Find Help directory, see the kind of businesses that support. If you have some expertise that you can share with us, we have a volunteer form you can fill out. We have industrial hygienists that don't support us financially, but they volunteer. They give us samples of their reports. If you don't have money but you have expertise, that you can share with us that would enhance the resources that we offer, please do get in touch with us. You can volunteer, you can become a sponsor, you can donate. We're a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible. If you like wine, come to our annual Up to Good fundraising event on September 12th in Sonoma.
That's always a fun event to go to, and I would encourage everybody, if you have a chance to go. It's fun to go out to California to drink the wine anyway, but it's especially fun to help people like you. Amy, I'm gonna follow. This is probably the last question, and I think you asked me this question one time, and you said, Chip, why do you do this? But Amy, why do you keep doing this after all these years? And what do you see for yourself in the future?
I do it because I feel useful. I feel like I've got knowledge that people need, and we are a resource that people need. And I'm trying to mentor my team so that when I retire, United Policyholders will continue to be this this force, continue getting up to good, continue to empower the insured. And as these new problems come at us, water damage limits, smoke damage limits, that we keep tackling them with strategies like the Risk Project, which you are helping, to support, so that we can continue to bring solutions to the have-somes, that have invested in a system that needs to work for them, but that constantly is in need of fine-tuning.
Well, that's fantastic. This has been, a great start. I really appreciate your time. I'm honored to have you as my first guest on this. Kathy's in the background. I don't know if there's any other questions or if we've
Yeah,
taken too much
I
time.
hope your future guests won't be as loquacious as I. But because of our relationship, I feel very comfortable with you, Chip, and I'm so, so impressed by you every day. I do not know how you crank out your blog posts and you're on top of everything. You always seem to every issue, you're like on it. It's amazing. So keep it up. And
Part
thank
of
you so
that
much
is
for having
well,
me
part
on.
of that is having friends like you all over the country that are every bit as dedicated. And so thank you so much, Kathy. If there's not anything else, I think we've taken up just about the entire hour, and I promised you I'd get you out of here so that you go to your next meeting out in California. Amy, I hope that I'll see you again soon. I'm going to be very busy out in Southern California, and I'm certain I'll see you out in Los Angeles soon. So you take care and God bless.
Stay healthy, Chip. Thank you so much.